thanks for tuning in. As always, this is Rev JR, and today's video is going to be a bit different. This is part of a collaboration with some other channels.
You can read! You can read, you can read, you can read, you can read. Yes indeed, you can read, you can read. You can read, you can read, you'll succeed. You can read, take the lead, you can read, you can read.
This series of videos is responding to the claim that atheists cannot read properly, from a fellow known as the Cleveland Street Preachers. So, without further ado, I present to you my response. This video is not the first in the series, but rather this is an intermission, dealing with a video that isn't actually in the original Atheists Can't Read Properly series. Links to the other videos will be down in the doobly-doo, so you can watch them in order and come back here at the appropriate time if you like. You might want some popcorn for the glorious, glorious thing you are about to witness.
Atheists love to rail on Christians and say that they're gullible and will believe anything that's told to them as long as it's from a priest or a pastor or it's written in our fairy tale book known as the Bible.
Well, your claim is that the info contained within the book are facts regardless of what evidence may show. So I don't think gullible is unfair. Lots of it seems to be fairy tale stuff, after all. Like the flood narrative, or people raising from the dead, or the totally brutal metal hellscape found in Revelation. It's not my fault that a talking snake that fooled some humans sound a lot like how Dionysus fooled Midas with the golden touch.
But don't atheists do the exact same thing, only with scientists and science books written by PhDs?
No, we don't. We are encouraged to question their wisdom, for one. Questioning your God is a sin known as blasphemy. The reason we know when scientists are wrong is because we don't blindly follow them. The average theist, on the other hand, accepts things like the existence of hell on the word of others like priests or prophets.
Seems a bit hypocritical.
It's only because you don't understand the fallacy of the straw men you're trying to burn down. Anyway.
I personally love reading nonfiction.
Me too. That's why I don't read the Bible.
If I wanted to read a fairy tale book or a fiction book, I would probably get something written by, say, Dawkins or Hitchens or Harris, Krauss, something along those lines. But I really prefer to read nonfiction books. That's why I stick to the Bible.
Can you explain this, please? If it's factual, which one of those two is correct? Go ahead. I'll wait.
Anyways, do you know where you came from? Your body.
Presumably, I came from my mother's womb when I was born. About 10 months before that, neither the egg nor the sperm existed yet. So I can safely say that I am the result of a natural, biological process just like you. Just like every other human, every other mammal, and so on.
If it took man millions of years to evolve, how long did it take for women to evolve?
Man, in the evolutionary sense, refers to humans. Man literally is the word for human that we borrowed from Old English. Follow me here. Whiffman and Wehrman described humans. Whiffman eventually became woman, and Wehrman dropped the where and became male. Context is important here to understand the next bit. Think about it this way. A female werewolf, therefore, is a whiff wolf, since were signifies the male part and wolf replaces the man part. Still with me? Now that we have the semantics out of the way, humans have always been male and female. That's how sexual dimorphism works. All mammals are sexual, meaning we have a male and a female for each species, whose chromosomes got passed along via sexual selection. Women evolved right along with men. In fact, the female is arguably the driving factor in this genetically, since she has the two X chromosomes, one of which becomes Y when the zygote forms, if it is signal. Anyway, long story short, men and women have existed together. In case you hadn't noticed, pregnancy is a thing.
Where did they meet at the first time?
Stop thinking of males and females as two different things. Evolutionarily speaking, we aren't. We're both simply opposite sides of the coin of progeny. Sexual reproduction is complex, and I can do a video on it later maybe, but the simple version is that all things with it probably share a common ancestor a very long time ago. The first sexual things would have been very simple organisms, and lineages with sexual reproduction like ours predate mammals entirely. Eggs eventually developed hardened shells before creatures left the water, after all. Every species is transitional, even us.
How did it happen? How did that byproduct for sure wasn't sterile? How do we know that?
Because you and I are stood here addressing one another. The sterile ones didn't have progeny and died off. We aren't their descendants, the ones who didn't have children.
You see, there's so many questions.
In fact, even if you believe the Bible, the reasoning remains the same. If Noah is the ancestor of all humans, he had to not be sterile to pass on his genes.
And the atheists give the answer, known as evolution.
Evolution does seem to describe reality. Mating cows in front of sticks doesn't seem to change their colors, even though the Bible claims it does in Genesis 30. If mating some white cows in front of some spotted sticks produced spotted cows, then we'd be teaching that at university agricultural extensions across the country. Alas, for now, we must settle for artificial insemination and the like of parents who have particular traits we want, instead of stick magic.
And yet I want to say this. Variation, a small change due to mutations, is not the kind of evolution that Darwin originally went for.
Darwin got close enough though, and unlike the Bible, we can revise his work as we make better observations. Remind me again how close Moses got with the spotted sticks in Genesis 30. Is it closer or further from observation than Darwin was? And never mind that if you tell me Darwin is wrong and I agree with you and we fix it, that doesn't bother me. However, if I suggest maybe your Bible also got it wrong, now I'm the bad guy. Do you see the problem here? I agree, Darwin didn't get everything right. Do you agree that the Bible didn't either?
Yet it's being taught now as evolution.
No, evolution is being taught as evolution. Darwin laid the foundations, but his word isn't gospel. That's why we teach things like genetics, after all. Darwin didn't know about genes, but we do. And as such, we updated his work, did more observing, and now we have modern evolutionary theory, which appears to describe reality.
Now wait a second. I don't exactly believe everything that I'm told. I like to think and examine things through. Is this feasible to believe?
Great question. Have you thought about the sticks by chance? Let's think hard about the sticks.
Well, let's think about this.
That's right. Don't run on automatic. Think.
Your computer, for example. It's designed. There's no way the computer could have perfectly or properly manufactured itself.
Correct. However, the underlying principles that let it run, like doing math based on voltage differences with no designer's input, well, the math still works just fine, even if we didn't make a computer to harness it. The electrical principles that materials have weren't created by us. We just used them.
There had to have been a mind to have been able to put all the components together.
Sure, but there's absolutely no mind necessary for the underlying principles of, voltage to work.
And yet each and every single component inside the computer has a purpose.
It has a purpose to the people who use it, sure. However, it doesn't have some intrinsic purpose unto itself. It has no afterlife. I can't reward it after death for being a good computer in any way that it would ever experience. I can't punish it either when it dies at the least opportune time. Your argument is doing more to convince me that God isn't something to worry about than most atheist arguments do, actually. Congratulations.
And it takes a mind to be able to know the purpose to then put that component, and not just put it, but place it exactly where it's supposed to be and make sure it's the exact perfect size so that the whole end product is fully functioning properly.
Again, though, we didn't create any of the laws that govern how it works. We simply used a natural process to create a machine like any other. If I find a sharp stick in the field and I reckon to stab an apple, to remove it from a tree, does that mean the stick was created expressly for removing an apple from the tree? Of course not. The sharp stick is no different from the computer in this analogy. I use it for something, therefore its purpose is whatever I use it for, and it has no purpose if not to serve me. Let's see if you can spot the problem with this logic as we continue.
Look at your human body. Of course, I'm talking in theory.
My body is theoretical?
Obviously, there's people with sickness and disease, so their bodies are not functioning properly.
So what you're saying is, there's a platonic human after whom all other humans are modeled, rather than us being made in some god's image? You do realize that Platonism is a completely different religion, right? According to you, God builds each of us, which means we must by definition be how he intended, in your analogy. Otherwise, you're saying that God isn't actually, creating us, or you're saying that he's nowhere near perfect.
But in theory, a healthy person's body is functioning properly.
So God created us on purpose to experience things like pain. Or are only the people who don't experience it the perfect ones? You can't have it both ways. What exactly constitutes a perfectly designed human, by the way? Don't you believe your Bible when it says God knit us all in the womb? For evolution, this is no problem, you see. Evolution allows for all these variations. We don't need some theoretical platonic human that God intends, or whatever. Humans are born and die and aren't pieced together. Also, please quit using the word theoretically when you clearly mean hypothetical, or assumed, or platonic, or whatever. In science, these terms are rigidly defined. I believe that you do, in fact, have the grasp on science. You claim that you are willfully conflating terms here to make yourself sound correct when you know you aren't. Lying is one of the sins mentioned in the 10 Commandments, isn't it? Please try to do less of it from now on.
This requires some sort of design, because there is no way that everything could have been placed there on its own.
No. A designer is not required. Traits can develop together and be dependent upon developing together. That's like saying that sand dunes require a designer.
Atheists love to say that nature did do this through natural selection and variation driven through the process called evolution over a long period of time of tens of millions of years and some mutations.
It's not just atheists who accept evolution. Even the Pope accepts evolution. You're arguing against other Christians here as well. With that point to the side, just because it makes you feel weird that a God wasn't involved doesn't mean that a God wasn't involved. That's an argument from emotion fallacy.
Which is very odd because almost always mutations are negative.
No, this is a straight up lie. Mutations are largely neutral or have no effect. Hair color, for example, the fusion of the sex chromosomes, for another. Mutations are just things that change over generations. Some mutations, like those that cause telomeres to last longer, mean that you can live a longer, natural life. Others, like melanin or hair, mean that you can deal with sunlight better to avoid cancer. Also, those mutations which benefit our immune system detract from the things that hurt us. Beneficial is a relative term.
We don't see any positive from the mutations.
Again, you're wrong. Most mutations are neutral. Mutations that help us offset things that try to kill us are beneficial. Like, for example, the population in Milano who happened to mutate an ability to produce apolipoprotein A1 Milano, which decreases arteriosclerosis in populations that have it. It is clearly a beneficial mutation, and it's one we can observe right now. There's another mutation resulting in loss of function of SERPINE1, which causes longer lifespans in the population of Amish who happen to get the mutation. It's clear you either don't know how genetics work, or you simply don't care to address things that conflict with your preconceived notions of reality.
So how could that then mean that we're evolving in a good way?
Well, by your logic, it doesn't. But fortunately, your logic is wrong, ergo, I don't have to say any more regarding this straw man.
See, I question these things. I don't think atheists do.
Simply saying, I do not understand, so the other person must be wrong, is not questioning. It's just obstinance. You can't just plug your ears and then complain that the conversations you don't hear aren't actually happening. You're like a small child with object impermanence. The objects, in this case, being evidence. Where'd it go?
That's why they're so quick to go and believe it. And then
We aren't quick to believe it just because we want to. I gave you reasons, and there's plenty more of them, and you can't rebut them. Until you can demonstrate that genetics is controlled entirely by your God, you can't simply dismiss genetics. Unless we refer to your earlier argument about theoretical humans to mean that you think there's more than one designer? Do you believe there's more than one God assembling people?
they'll condemn me and condemn a Christian for saying these things, and then simply say you just don't understand evolution.
I am not condemning you, I am condemning your ideas. There's a difference. You are free to demonstrate what I've got wrong, though. We say you are wrong because you describe the things contained within evolution incorrectly. Being incorrect is a form of being wrong, you know.
No, I understand it pretty well.
So, you're actually just misrepresenting it on purpose to build a false narrative of the thing you're arguing against. Interesting. You know, when I debate theists, I don't do it by lying about what their book says. I do it by saying, here's what is in the book, and here's the chapter and verse, and the context. You do none of this. And you actively misrepresent or straight out lie about what you claim to understand very well. You are a disingenuous person in the extreme.
I don't think you do. That's why you believe it.
What does that even mean? Also, couldn't I say the same of you and your beliefs? I'm sure you're going to explain it to me, so let's get on with it.
The mathematical and statistical impossibilities are almost endless.
You know, that's not how statistics work. Much like the supernovae that are also equally improbable, which we observe with regularity. Also, that's a form of Bayesian logic, and that kind of math doesn't actually reflect how things work. It's simply guesswork, not based on observation. In fact, it cannot be based on observation.
One of the world's leading chemists, James Tour, even says that he himself doesn't even fully understand evolution as well as many of his peers, and it just seems taboo if any of them come out and say it, so they just don't. They just kind of roll with it.
See what you did there? You just purposefully misrepresented the context of the statement. I had to look very hard for this because you gave no citation. The quote you provided doesn't seem to exist. I used the Wayback Machine to even see what it might have said, and you misrepresented it here based on the links you apparently didn't check in the original article. Jim Torr seems to be a proponent of microevolution, though. Jim even admits that the reason that he doesn't understand or accept macroevolution is due to the fact that he is not an expert in it, and he even says something to this effect. He clearly states that he doesn't advocate for ID either. He says only that he is skeptical of how microevolution becomes macroevolution. Either way, I don't need to argue on the authority of quotes that don't appear to exist to make my arguments clear to you. I can do so just fine with the evidence available.
Yeah.
I'm glad you agree that you're a disingenuous fellow who doesn't even bother to check references to make sure he isn't slandering someone.
That's because it mathematically falls apart terribly.
No, it doesn't. Even Jim says he simply doesn't believe all the claims about macroevolution. He made no real claims to its probability.
I mean, think about this.
Aw, why do I have to think about it when you're allowed to just make things up? Oh, that's right. I learned that by thinking about it. Maybe you should try it also. It's much more fun than misrepresenting people all the time and lying about things you simply don't understand.
How did the heart, the blood, and the veins all evolve at the same time?
They evolved together, one facilitating the other, but it didn't happen all at once. It was a result of simpler processes compounding over time. It's not like how you put foundations on a house, then wall joists, then pipe, then you finish the house, hook up the water, turn on the pump. It's more like how a riverbed and a river happen at the same time. If water never starts to flow, the water won't create a riverbed. Even a little bit of water can make the Grand Canyon, though.
Of course, atheists will have an answer for this.
Well, so will Christians or anyone else who accepts that evolution is correct and that you can't breed for spotted cows by using sticks. Come on, man. Quit pretending that atheists are the only people in the world who accept evidence for evolution. I hope you do that stick experiment for me soon. I want some independent results. Genesis 30 must be tested for science.
Some of them will even tell me, just Google it.
I wouldn't tell you simply to Google it. I mean, I might if you were this brazenly obtuse in person, but I wouldn't just for tits and giggles. I would, however, tell you to check Google or whatever, and possibly even provide sources and ideas for experiments to prove me wrong, like the sticks experiment. Remember that one? I expect you to check my sources, though. Kind of like I checked the ones you didn't provide. See, I think that's your real problem. You don't want people to Google because they'll find out you're full of this stuff that makes your eyes brown.
And yet, you look at the Google...
Well, I mean, they look brown in this video. Anyway.
Responses.
Yes, that's what I did. And that's how I found your quotation from Jim not to be his, apparently.
That people have put up.
This video will be one of them by the time you're watching it.
There's no facts for certain.
No, see, that's you projecting. You think that because you are uncertain, that everyone must be. You think that because you lie, everyone must lie. Honesty is one hell of a drug when you're confronted with it, isn't it?
It's all just possibilities.
I hope he gets to something other than straw men soon. I can't keep debating the stuff that apparently only exists in his head.
I don't want possibilities. I want facts. Atheists, I love facts.
Fact. The Bible is wrong about kinds. Fact. Bats are not birds. Fact. Snakes cannot talk. Fact. Stick breeding does not work. Fact. You have provided none of the facts in this video so far. How many more you want? I got plenty.
So you mean to tell me that the heart, blood, and veins happen to evolve all at the exact same time, slowly, over a period of millions of years? What was the first organism it happened?
The circulatory system became more complex as the forms of life it supported did. Basically, the circulatory system developed first in the multicellular organisms that eventually developed outsides and insides. necessitating nutrient delivery and removal. Hydra and planaria are two examples of things with the kind of halfway points between no circulatory system and a simple one, with bits that act as circulatory systems by proxy, by the nature of how they form. I could show you the next progressions up to more complex life, but this video is getting long enough already. Carry on.
You can't have blood without veins and a heart. You can't have a heart without veins and blood. You can't have veins.
Correct, but you can have precursors to blood in the precursors to veins or capillaries or arteries or whatever. You can have them pumped by the organs which were the precursors to the heart.
There's a purpose to each and every one of those parts.
The purpose of blood, or its precursors, is to move nutrients from the outside to the organs inside and to remove the waste from them. The purpose of the veins is to act as a place for the blood to travel. The purpose of the capillaries is to interface with the lungs and other parts of the body, but the lungs specifically, whose purpose is to provide air to the blood. And the capillaries in the other parts of the body provide the air in the blood to the systems out here, like the muscles, that require it to function. The marrow in the bones serves to create some of the blood, as well as provide the structure for your body. None of this requires a designer. All of it has simpler components, which it was before it became what it is. Simpler processes compound over generations into more complex processes, generally speaking. Sometimes processes combine or become obsolete, of course.
How did nature and physics, we'll say physics, drive this process when physics doesn't have a mind to put the pieces in the computer together?
You know, the ancients used to believe that a god must be responsible for the floods or the lightning, and for much the same reason. Someone must cause the winds to blow, to move the rains, and to send the lightning. They couldn't understand how this could all just happen naturally. They built temples to the god of rain, did rain dances, and so on, hoping to win favor with a god to make the rains come or go. You're acting the same way. You think that because you don't understand the process, that it must be a god causing all the different bits to move in the way it does. Instead of understanding how the same electromagnetic forces that cause lightning also cause molecules to form, more or less, and a bunch of simple EM interactions can create a complex one, like a lightning bolt. The weak forces that dictate mostly how biochemistry functions, for example, are no more complex than the EM interactions that describe how lightning forms. There's just more of them. The scale is what changes.
You're telling me that unbeneficial mutations simply did it? Simply through natural selection and variation? And yet, there's not even one shred of evidence for natural selection and variation originating a species.
There's tons of evidence, but you keep ignoring it. Like how horses and donkeys are currently divergent, or ring species, or whatever. We also have fossil evidence that shows which strata certain species first appeared in. We also have genetic markers we can show to determine how traits were passed on.
There's not one shred of evidence. You trace back dogs, you get dogs.
No. If you trace back dogs, you will get wild dogs like the wolves. If you go a bit further back, you get the more primitive Leptosian, Eusion, and the dire wolves. Tracing back further, you get primitive canids, including those like Hesperocyon. Predating the canids were the creodonts, Mesonicids, and their relatives. Continue even further and you'll get even closer to where the ancestors of all quadrupedal mammalia forms was, and so on. There's plenty of evidence too, more than I can put in this video.
You trace back bacteria, you get bacteria.
No, if you trace bacteria, you eventually go to the simplest eukaryota, then to the simpler still prokaryota. It's around this time that you'll find also the viruses that likely split off from these original bacteria, so to speak. It's also this time you'll find things like chlorophyll developing. Literally, some of the simplest bacteria came to be sequestered by more complex bacteria, and they lived symbiotically until they become one larger organism. Most of the individual parts of any given cell are direct descendants of much simpler prokaryota or eukaryota, simply working together. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
You never see them go outside of those realms. Why is that?
As I just demonstrated, you are incorrect. If your assertion were correct, then it would be a valid question. But your assertion is not.
Don't the atheists question these things? Or do they just, I don't know, blindly and gullibly believe everything?
As I just said, I don't have to blindly and gullibly believe that spotted sticks can lead to spotted cows. I explained to you how evolution works. I am not blindly following anything. I am observing the evidence and coming to the conclusion which derived from it. Can't wait for those proximal stick breeds, though. So good luck.
Now, I then thought to myself, well, let's see here. Human beings, if we take the average human population growth rate, okay, the average growth rate of human beings, if human beings existed for 200,000 years, take that growth rate, technically right now, we should have hundreds of billions of human beings walking this earth.
No. In fact, we shouldn't.
And honestly,
If it's honest, it'll be the first honest thing in your video.
we should have that much more primates, monkeys on this earth, but we don't.
The main reason there's more of us now is because we happen to become dominant. It really is that simple.
Why is that?
Did I stutter?
We don't.
We do, actually.
I think of these things.
This is why your thoughts are not data. You can think of literally anything. I can think of unicorns. And Harry Potter. Biodome with Pauly Shore.
I don't think the atheists do.
Well, then, you're wrong, and by your own admission. You're arguing straw men of things you don't think people are thinking of. You know that we disagree with you, as well as many of your fellow theists, but you claim you don't know that we disagree with you. Mental gymnastics is one hell of a workout.
Which is very hypocritical because I, as the Christian, am supposedly the gullible, stupid, brainwashed, deluded person.
I didn't say it. I just think you're obstinate and willfully ignorant. Your theism has little to do with it, honestly.
That nearly every atheist tells me about.
Just maybe. It has something to do with the fact that you keep telling us what we believe, and we're just doing the same thing in return. It couldn't be that we're simply returning your argument with your own argument, and you're oblivious to this bit of tukolkwe you engage in when it's presented to you.
So,
Dead air makes for great radio, doesn't it?
I thought to myself, when were the first artifacts of humans made? And I kept doing research. I couldn't find the oldest artifacts by human beings older than just a few thousand years old. Perfectly in line with what the Bible teaches. And yet recently, there has been a discovery. 3.3 million year old tools in the land close to Ethiopia. That's right. And how did the scientists come across this? Take a look.
Oh, this next clip looks like it's probably got copyright protections. But I mean, yes, the oldest stone tools predate humans and were found to date around 3.3 million years ago.
Now I watched this and I wondered, how did they collaborate and come to this number, 3.3 million? I want to know, how did they come to this number? Obviously it's not in the video, but it just sounds basically in a nutshell that they came together and concluded it. Used their PhDs to their advantage, presented it to the scientific community, and all of a sudden they like it. It lines up with their doctrine, their religious doctrine that they teach. Therefore it's accepted.
From the abstract, we report the discovery of Lomekwi 3, a 3.3 million year old archaeological site where in situ stone artifacts occur in spatiotemporal association with Pliocene hominin fossils in a wooded paleo environment. What this means is that they found it in a site which is known to be of a certain age, and the artifacts found within the site can be reasonably assessed as being similar. The original NBC article you posted even says they were working on confirming it further. Do you do anything but ignore the facts for your science, by chance? You couldn't even see fit to use the Journal of Nature abstract instead of the NBC News story.
I don't know, atheists.
We can tell.
Unlike you guys, I'm not gullible and just believe everything that I'm told by the scientific community.
No, you'd much rather believe whatever your mind dreams up and then ignore any evidence that didn't also come from there. Gullible is definitely not the word I'd use. Paranoid, egoist, megalomaniac, perhaps. Not gullible, though. The thing is, I do believe you actually try to give this honest thought. It's just that you aren't very good at it.
Nor the science textbooks at National Geographic.
Says the guy who used an NBC News video and a fake quote as the only two pieces of evidence that people are wrong about straw men. Huh.
I like to examine things and think. I'm a free thinker, that's why I'm a Christian.
Does free thinker mean I don't check my sources? And I ignore the facts I don't like?
Unlike you who are slaves to your brains.
That is called projection. You're the one who can't accept any evidence that doesn't come from the space between your ears. That sounds a lot more like slavery of the mind, I think.
I realize that the human body has to have a designer.
Oh, so you're going to provide evidence for this, or did you just think about it again? Remember, even if you show evolution is wrong, it doesn't mean that a god is involved. You still have to demonstrate a god. Not just show that evolution is wrong. And you've done neither.
And that there's a purpose for every single organ put inside of it.
What's the purpose of the appendix, then? How about the coccyx?
And that a foreknowledge is required to put those there, and then have it all sized properly, and then put in the exact spots that's needed.
And I realize there isn't such a necessity. I can also make baseless assertions, you see.
And that physics alone, nature, does not have that foreknowledge to be able to do that and drive this processes even over tens of millions of years.
Well, you're allowed to come to realizations that are incorrect or completely unfounded on reality, after all. It doesn't make you correct.
So there's no way those rocks, an atheist is going to tell me, was naturally made. These PhDs are clearly telling us and claiming, you see the way these rocks are shaped? Oh, clearly, this was done by man.
No. It was clearly done by an ape that predates us humans, if you'd have read even the news article you put here yourself.
There's no way this was done naturally. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. How many rocks are there on this earth of various shapes and sizes? Hundreds of billions, trillions? I don't know, we don't know. Only God knows.
It's much more complex than that, but the Smithsonian has a very neat web article on it with some basic info down in the doobly-doo.
You mean to tell me there's no way those rocks were, I don't know, maybe just shaped that way naturally?
So, earlier in the video, you told us how a scientist convinced you that evolution wasn't real because he was a scientist. But now when a scientist tells you that some old stone tools appeared to have been created by apes, you don't believe him because he's a scientist. Does your special pleading know no bounds? Can you at least be consistent in what you will or will not accept as evidence? Probably not.
After all, being right next to a riverbed, don't we know scientifically that when water is constantly running past or hitting rock, it can slowly erode and be shaped and formed over time?
Absolutely correct. That's also how we know that rivers don't create cleavage marks and broken rock doesn't look eroded. I mean, this is just one of the tools at our disposal to evaluate the artifact, but it's a damn good one. Or maybe not. See, I can do it too. That's where I'm going to wrap this up. Please remember to check out the next video in this series, the link to which should be popping up at the end of this video somewhere here, if I'd done everything right. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe for more great content just like this. Also some that probably isn't just like this. If you'd like to know how to get your name on my screen right here, check out my Patreon. If you can spare a cup of coffee a month, that'd be great. Many thanks again to my Patreon supporter. Please remember to share this video. I want to get a lot of diverse opinions on it. The links to the other videos will also be down below, as well as links to the relevant citations and so on. Thank you again for your time, and as always, this has been Rev JR, signing off.